In this modern day and age, fashion can't exist without trends forming in its landscape, no matter how large or small the area of operation is. Pretty much everyone got into fashion while something was trendy, whether you can reminisce on your days as a supreme off-white babe hype beast, or an early to mid 2K bling girly, or a bloatcore enjoyer. One thing that can be observed with most trends in fashion is the inevitable hate they will get from all types of fashion enjoyers for one reason or another. I can't recall any trend that hasn't gotten hate for some reason. Some people hate on trending styles simply because they are trending and they feel okay. Let me save the explanation. I'm gonna give my theories about why fashion consumers hate on trends after a certain amount of time, and a lot of this is informed by Fashionology by Yunya Karamura. So none of this is fact, but a lot of this is aided by the content of this book that I believe in, as well as evidence that I've personally observed and connections that can be made between the two. So yeah, let's get into it. We can start by making the distinction between fashion and clothes. Fashion is a realized phenomenon, it's a belief, a faith even. You have to understand and assert yourself as someone who is into fashion, and that's all it takes. It's not a tangible thing, it's personal first. That's why you have to have that type of awakening in yourself to pass the threshold of having a certain amount of consideration for your appearance above the average person who isn't into fashion. Clothing is the main vehicle, the means through which fashion is expressed. It could be a metaphor for all your fashion appreciation that resides outside of yourself. This is when you start to contribute to other people's perception of fashion for a certain demographic, area, time of year, or the trend cycle, etc. Fashion is produced in the minds of all of us, but it can only be manifested, seen, and exercised through clothes. Therefore, although they are separate, they are intrinsically linked, and other than extreme and mostly obsolete cases, one cannot exist without the other. These other extreme cases include situations like the army, where the only clothing that can be worn and observed are the same, and the only changes that will be made is if you rank up. But what we're focusing on here is the absence of customization by choice. Basically, a true vacuum, right? In a system like this, the clothes exist but fashion cannot, because fashion can only exist in a mobile and fluid society that allows change or variation. The availability of change and variation leaves the option of customization, and customization will inevitably breed fashion because differences in attire and uniform will eventually be observed by others, and then they will in turn be influenced to participate in their own customization. Stay with me, please. Continuing on with this low level, newly fashionable society, if there's someone of enough influence or power that sets the standard for style through either declaration or mass respect and reverence gained by observers, then said observers will inevitably try to imitate this mode of dress, and the traction of multiple people adopting these styles create a trend. It can only be a trend if there's an opposing group of people not engaging with the style and the adoption of the style is quick and current enough. If everyone was doing it, it would no longer be a trend, it would become the new uniform. So just like the overarching system of fashion, trends themselves can only exist with variation. And before moving on to some of my theories, just to add in, what trends do is offer comfort and safety knowing that what you're wearing won't be ridiculed because there's comfort in the conventionally accepted and current, and inversely there's discomfort and sometimes bravery but individuality found in the direct opposite, like wearing something considered outdated or out of style. Also, trends can be viewed as self-perpetuating as oftentimes, trends don't begin as such. They originate from simple differentiations in style meant to denote a certain membership in society. It could again be a group of fashion participants who are viewed as muses in a sense that they create visible symbols within their dress to signal to other like minded participants and observers in fashion that they belong to a class of society. I say class, but it can range from anywhere to class denotation to subcultural association to expression of a considered taste in general. Basically, if you know, you know. And for the less people who know, the more important the ones that do know become. At some point, the people outside of these circles will recognize this fellowship and attempt to imitate it, right? Like previously stated, due to a desire to be a part of that group or even compete with those in it. This is when the trend is formed, as the previous esoteric mode of identification loses its exclusivity and becomes something else. If it gets too popular, the label of trend can now be attached. The original group of differentiators usually catch wind of this and decide to find new low-key symbols to identify each other, leaving the previously identified symbols behind for the masses who have not assimilated them. And yeah, this happens forever, over and over again, very often. Basically, once you're on the same thing that I'm on, I'll already be on something else, or however that meme goes. The combination of people wanting to move within fashion and be in style or up to date with people wanting to differentiate themselves from the masses and find deeper and more intimate connections with themselves and other like-minded people are two big reasons why people adopt trends. Those are just two reasons. Okay, so now the biggest ideas we will be using for this video are two of some of the most important aspects of fashion: change and novelty. Fashion only began to gain respect in various academic fields when they started to realize the changes in society and times, whether progression or regression, could be marked through changes in fashion. In a profile for The New Yorker, Karl Lagerfeld speaks of a Paris-based banker named Albert Kahn who commissioned photographers and filmmakers to set up cameras all around the world to just document society. Lagerfeld says Kahn set up a specific camera on a Paris street corner and filmed for 10 years. And through the footage, one can observe that the cars and buildings didn't change, but the way how people dressed, the way how they walked, and their attitude changed much more than that. So don't tell him that fashion isn't important. All of this to say, due to fashion as previously explained only being able to exist in mobile and fluid societies, change must occur in order for the miracle of fashion to be upheld in the minds of both participants and observers. The thing about trends is, they most definitely bring forth change and mark changes in time periods, but their shelf lives aren't infinite. There's an inevitable moment in time that's almost as certain as death itself. The moment when trends grow tired and participants and observers do the same. Change brings forth new things, but things can only be new for so long. Once trends are no longer new, they become pseudo-uniform. This is the time period where most people are mainly used to seeing these styles and they're not so hot anymore, but they are still tolerated. The moment that trends overstay their welcome is when the desire for change begins to nag at fashion enthusiasts once more. And this is one of the main reasons why at some point we just can't stomach these styles. The only way trends can become styles or mainstays within the fashion system is if they get that popular or that accepted for enough time until the heat that a trend has to have in order for it to be a trend wears off. I basically made that sound so much more scientific than it actually is. That's funny. But yes, I don't think that's hard to see or believe, right? Right? Now, another one of the pillars of fashion is novelty, right? Novelty and change can be quite similar, but in this context, novelty details more of the uniqueness that is so valued in fashion. There's a lot of pandering that goes on in fashion. It's a social activity, and there's nothing wrong with dressing for the eyes of others, as long as you're putting yourself first. Novelty from the participant perspective manifests in people like archive fashion heads who collect various old dead stock pieces that they'll never see on anybody else. There's a strong sense of sentimentality and personal attachment here. Same goes with thrifting, although that's also heavily influenced by cheaper prices. A lot of people can identify in a piece of clothing that they know doesn't belong to anyone or barely, to the point where they'll never have to worry about their identity being challenged or compromised by seeing someone else in it. Now, this idea of novelty in the context of uniqueness doesn't heavily influence most people, as we can see the majority of fashion enjoyers engage with every trend that comes around. That checks out, as evidently the group of fashion participants and observers who end up calling for the end of trends usually have either never been a fan of the trend since the beginning, or were but have reached the maximum point of toleration for these trends a lot earlier than most. Coming back to the idea of pandering in fashion, a lot of people confuse dressing to please themselves through direct resonance with their clothing with dressing in a sense that they know many others will appreciate because of the current zeitgeist. I might go even as far as to say the recognition and validation from others is all they do it for, and that's where the majority of their enjoyment lies when it should make them happy first. It's all about the beholder and what the beholder wants in the minds of most. Furthermore, most people's ideal fashion landscape would be for everyone to have a distinct individual look that can create a fantastic, diverse, and infinitely enjoyable space that would never grow tired or old, but that is not possible simply because of people being of the same archetypes and similar interests and same ideas or values being overwhelmingly popular than the others. So with this dream scenario being acknowledged and believed in, I theorize that on the other hand, when trends start to set in and too many people are wearing the same styles or pieces, and deeper connections can be seen down to people having the same muses or reference points, it attacks people's desire for novelty in the fashion around them. And this can be uncomfortable for those not enthralled in the current trend cycle. More and more people participating in the same styles of dress slowly overpowers the opposing force of this socio-psychological movement, and as previously stated, if there's nobody available to go against these conventionally accepted modes of dressing, then it becomes a uniform. The scenario of a society-wide uniform would be the worst possible condition for a lot of fashion enthusiasts. So as a result, when the scale that fashion operates on is too heavily tipped onto one side, an outcry is made for the return of diversity in order to keep the miracle of fashion alive in their minds. None of us live in a society where everyone is the same. In a society like that, fashion wouldn't even need to exist. So when the landscape starts to reflect a society like that, the people on the outside of this situation begin to take action. That's what I think. Overcomplicating it again, I know. Now, I know there's a lot of people who simply enjoy timelessness in fashion, from everyday regular consumers like you and me to legendary designers like Martin Margiela and Helmut Lang. And their cited reasons for despising trends may be due to it being some form of vanity or unintelligence displayed in participating in it. But let's be real, it would be boring if we didn't have anybody running with designs like that, you know? I think it's especially different from a creator's perspective because in the 2020 documentary Martin Margiela, in his own words, Margiela explained how he saw fashion changing and following his style after about a decade of operation or so, and he became depressed and needed to change things up. I feel like the take on trends of being a bad thing that people are shallow for engaging in is a take stuck within itself. And to be a little less academic about how I could put this, it's really not that serious, man. Just vibe. Like, I'd like to believe that designers like Helmut Lang and Yoji Yamamoto, who aren't big fans of trends, understand and accept them and simply design for the ones who work outside of the system, because of course these types of people exist. I just think anybody who genuinely hates people for engaging with trends and think they're better than them for not engaging with trends needs to get their head up out of their butt and have some fun. So yeah, I think that could also be another reason why people hate on trends. They genuinely see it as like some sort of failure of humanity. But I won't recognize or respect this view as sensible at any point in time because as long as you and me are different, I'm gonna do stuff that a lot of people do that you probably would never engage in, and vice versa. But everybody has their own little pleasures and leisures, so just be a real person, alright? I also want to speak about how the main reasons I stated for the despise of trends play out specifically in the social media world. Let's say I go on TikTok or Instagram and decide, hey, I'm gonna post myself wearing Heelys. For whatever reason, you may be doing that, right? And I do a little fit check where I do my little 360 and maybe do a special spotlight on the Heelys, right? Let's say this video gains a huge amount of traction, maybe because I'm a popular page or I just hit the algorithm in the sweet spot, who knows? And a lot of people see this video, specifically like men from the age of 16 to 24. And over the next 3 to 6 months, I see a surge in Heelys wearers on my Instagram and TikTok feeds. That's the key here, specifically on the internet. Would you consider this a trend? Are Heelys then trendy to you, even though you can only observe a trail of recent growth in interest for the shoe on the internet? Well, I'll tell you what I think. I think they are. The most common rebuttal that someone will give you for this is that nobody knows about the shoe or nobody wears this in real life. And that could mostly be true. But the thing about social media platforms is that as long as you put it out there, it can never be enjoyed and viewed in isolation. Someone else saw the same thing as you did at some point in time. And with the hyper optimized algorithm of the TikTok For You page, we can essentially be on the extremely wide but simultaneously compressed internet even at the same time. If we both have similar interests, there's a high chance we're going to end up seeing the same videos at some point, like previously stated. So operating on my previous definition of a trend, it doesn't matter if I live in Utah and you live in Germany and the other guy lives in Greece. If we all have the same reference points, being the same posts of the same people wearing the same stuff, and we all individually react by deciding that we want to wear those shoes because that's a great idea. Nobody wears Heelys, so I can use them to differentiate myself. Newsflash, man, there's like 1,000 more guys out there just like you all across the world thinking the same thing. Imagine going to a Halloween party and thinking you picked the most obscure costume and everybody's gonna think it's so cool, and you get there and everybody else is wearing the same thing. Like, you're all just under the same roof in the same swag anyway. Like, wouldn't that be so bizarre? Well, the only difference with that and the internet and this theoretical Healy situation I'm proposing is that the internet is a much bigger space. It's practically infinite. I don't mean to attack or try to belittle any trend enjoyers, I'm just attempting to detail the thought process behind it from the participant's view as well as a view they can't see, which is immediately outside of themselves. So again, there's nothing wrong with the collective engagement in trends, okay? The whole point of me trying to illustrate the situation for you is to say you can't illegitimate the influence of the internet on real people in the real world just because you can't see them. That's like when somebody wins a Grammy and you're like, yo, who the hell is that? Or there's a number one song that you've never heard or you've never heard it on the radio. And you use that reasoning to say it's probably irrelevant or insignificant. But think outside yourself for a second, you know? A decent amount of the people watching this video right now are probably into archive fashion, and there's a really good chance that that's because of the 2020 archive boom on TikTok during the pandemic. If you've engaged in bloatcore or Y2K or coquette or opium or office siren in the past 2 years, there's a 99% chance that it's because of TikTok or some form of runoff or trickle down from TikTok, right? Here are what we call microtrends, and the main components of microtrends include them being decentralized or having some sort of decentralized origins or reasons for their surge or resurgence, aka the internet. They usually bleed into the real world fashion system that most people can observe if they break past a threshold of popularity at some point. And until they break past this threshold, yes, you won't see anybody wearing it in real life. Because the average person doesn't know about what it is unless they live in a major fashion city. So, yes, although the narrative was heavily assimilated when it first came to prominence, we need to evolve past that thinking. Because unlike back then, we now have strong evidence that nobody wears these styles in real life until we get empirical reporting from other fashion enthusiasts that actually, yeah, I did see somebody wearing a Repetto flats in Pennsylvania today for the first time. That for the first time thing is a very, very magical thing because it only happens once, and after that, it's on its way to its death, slowly but surely. I would love, love, love to hear what you have to say about all of this and what you think. Please, please, please leave some type of comment. It also helps with the algorithm apparently, but I'd love to have some type of discussion, so let's talk. If you want more fashion content like this, then please like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.